All right, good afternoon, everyone. We have a joint committee session this afternoon between our Government and Operations and Fiscal Policy and Health and Human Services Committee to discuss one item for the FY23 operating budget, and that is the Office of Grants Management. I'll note for the record that my colleague, Council Member Navarro, Chair Navarro of our Government Operations Committee, will not be joining us this afternoon. So thank you all very much. Why don't we just jump right in with Ms. Chen.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carolyn Chen, Legislative Analyst with the County Council. Just quickly to walk through, this is the launch of the Office of Grants Management on July 1st, 2022, so there was not a previous budget. This is the first budget. What's to note in the packet is that in our initial fiscal impact statement in 2020, there was more personnel. It cost about $500,000 to open this office. In this year, we have seen the recommendation from the county executive to be streamlined, so it's down to $350,000, which is great. And that's on page 2. So you have 3 personnel that are recommended in fiscal year 23 to kick off this office: the director, Office of Grants Management, a grant-seeking program manager for external grants, and a grant distribution program manager to work with departments and small office operating expenses. And finally, the pilot phase that was in page 4. This was because we had originally had legislation to open July 1st, 2021, COVID. And so in the meantime, just selected departments, we applied for grants and secured $925,000 in the past year. So just as to show that the concept can work. And that's it. Oh, and the recommendation is to approve as submitted by the executive.
Great. I do have a few questions, so thank you all so much, and we're excited to be at this point. I know that we've been working hard towards execution of this really important program. Agency, because we know it will combine so many different efforts and I think really help streamline things. Just how are we going to formally engage key stakeholders, nonprofit providers moving forward? What's that going to look like? Will there be an advisory committee of some sort, or if you can just help remind us what the vision is for that aspect of the work? There will be constant engagement, and there was significant engagement in the development of this office to begin with, but I think just to make sure we maintain that momentum, would love to hear some thoughts on that.
One of the opportunities we have with the launch of the grant office is to actually get public input from organizations and residents prior to the launch of any grant application process. That's important, and that's never happened before. In addition, the outreach can now be amplified with working with county departments themselves and outreaching through the departments to engage with organizations and residents. The 8 different responsibilities that are outlined in the legislation, which is on page 1 and 2. 7, perform public outreach regarding grants offered by the county. And that is to make sure that a very wide net is cast, not of just informing about grants when they're launched, but also in accessing the grants, which OMB analyst / director can comment on if you want.
So a lot of this comes down to administrative capacity, and Raphael Murphy, OMB analyst, I will be the new director of this office as of this morning. So just been here a little bit, but a lot of this is administrative capacity. Before the function of gathering community input and stakeholders was put on OMB as a fragment of their other broad responsibilities. By having this centralized, a single office, being focused on this, there's more administrative capacity to pull in more feedback from the community, leveraging the RSC directors and their relationships with, community groups and different, subsectors of communities can be incredibly important. Being able to work specifically with departments who, work with a segment of the nonprofit community, being able to pull in those stakeholders as well. But again, that just administrative capacity to gather this feedback, to collate it into a meaningful and actionable format, to be able to, collate those recommendations into action and implement them system-wide. So having the grants processes, the grants mechanism, and the grants outreach channeling through a single office gives you the opportunity to, ensure that all that feedback is acted upon. One of the big parts of the legislation is the racial equity and social justice piece. So again, having this office policing that, for lack of a better word, or ensuring its implementation in, grants processes going forward in terms of how the grants mechanism is structured. There's some, as outlined in the racial equity statement for the supplemental appropriation this past fall. That was cited as the key thing, even just the way the grants mechanism works versus the reimbursable contract that has racial equity and social justice impacts as well. So all of that being channeled through a single entity allows that to take place. There has not been any formal thinking, or I shouldn't say formal thinking, but nothing has been set yet in terms of whether there's going to be an advisory board or how that would be structured. Because again, this office has been stood up just now, not just been appointed or hired for this position as of this morning. So there hasn't been a lot of time to do that, longer term thinking, but that's certainly feasible. And there's certainly something that's possible, and it's in line with the executive's thinking on this.
That makes a lot of sense. I totally understand. We're building a plane and flying it at the same time. And congratulations on the new position, Mr. Murphy. I think your close interaction with the development of this since the beginning, I think, will help you be able to hit the ground running. And it goes without saying, you've got 9 people who want to see you succeed and whose offices you can leverage and help to build relationships on, along with our incredible central staff as well. I just, for whatever it's worth, having been around a while, would advise you to strongly consider putting together some form of an advisory body, which will help you expand your reach and leverage. I would also advise to develop a running list of the various convening organizations. There are many of them, but then make it a point to proactively reach out to them and maybe get on their calendar, if possible, once a year or once every 2 years as a stopping point, because it will help the cross communication and save you time, especially around the budget process, that I think could be valuable. And I appreciate Ms. Chen's comments about, leveraging and interacting more directly with departments. There's no denying that will be an advantage as well. But I think something that will be important. Final question for me, and then I have 2 colleagues who are in the queue, is, once we do get everything up and running and our bearings straight and the dust settles, the vision for this office is to be proactive in identifying other potential funding opportunities that are out there, particularly within our federal government, maybe state as well. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you envision that looking like, being proactive in identifying potential funding sources that maybe the county can't go after directly, but in partnership with a coalition of organizations may be able to stand up?
Yeah, I think in terms of pursuing outside funding, there is part of the role of this office is going to be helping our nonprofit community leverage these outside resources. So there isn't always, on the part of federal agencies or even state entities, they would rather just give it directly to the implementer. So a lot of the money that would come through us, we would be a handoff to the nonprofit organizations. And so there's extra cost and time and loss involved in that. So what would be more ideal, what make our nonprofits more competitive, is for us to be their ally and their advocate in helping them leverage these dollars, get it directly into the nonprofits who are going to be using it, rather than having us be as a pass-through. So a big part of this office is going to be, working with the nonprofit community, helping them leverage these opportunities, developing support letters, developing other support mechanisms, providing the background if, say, they're leveraging money that they already get from us for a program and they want to expand that program, serve more people, helping them put together the background justification to show what can be done, demonstrating their results. Again, when they have that letter coming from us or that support, and again, having been the nonprofit director for 6 years myself, I've been familiar with that, where when you do have that institutional support, your proposals looked at much more strongly, you are much more competitive, and you're more likely to bring more resources and expand your programs.
Great.
So that would be a big part of this office's role is, not necessarily writing these proposals, but just being a partner and advocate and ally for them.
Awesome. I've got Councilmember Rice, followed by Council Vice President Glass, and then Councilmember Friedson.
Well, quite honestly, Mr. President, you actually asked my question. It was really centered around the engagement with our nonprofit community. You've already addressed it. Just want to double down. It's going to be incredibly important, as you know, for the success of the department to be able to make sure that you're developing those relationships early. And so I would, congratulations first. And now that you're in the role of director, I'd encourage you to start reaching out and establishing. I know you already know, many of them have worked with them, but it will be important in your new role to make sure that you're establishing those connections as you move forward, because that will give you the ability to really know hands-on what's happening in the community, what some of the needs are, and how best to advise the executive and the council on how to continue to meet those needs. So thank you and congratulations.
Council Vice President Glass.
Congratulations. I had a number of people contacting me over the last 24 hours with excitement and anticipation of this conversation, and one of their questions was, who is going to lead this new body? And so I'm glad that you are here to share that with everybody who's following this conversation. And I appreciate the leading questions from the council president, because I think I will double and triple down, as I'm keeping score, on the point that we really need that engagement and that involvement. We have an incredible, wonderful, highly sophisticated nonprofit sector here, and their input is valuable, and they volunteer and dedicate themselves to consensus building and having a better government and better communication as well. So that will serve everybody well. The only follow-up questions I have for you as the new director, and I appreciate you sharing that you were a director of a nonprofit for 6 years. I was one for 4 years before coming here. So our intimate knowledge of the sector, what works, what doesn't, the role of government, I think will prove helpful, particularly for you in this role. And as this body becomes, for lack of a better term, the clearinghouse for the grants process, I'm curious your thoughts on one of the age-old problems and questions that we grapple with is to how to support established, larger organizations that are doing wonderful work, and then newer, more nimble, but less resourced organizations that are identifying gaps and trying to fill them here, because we only have so much funding. So what is your just more general philosophy, Mr. Murphy, on how that will be managed?
Thank you. So in terms of in my nonprofit experience, one of the programs I was most proud of was we did a lot of youth development and youth engagement and helping young people in their communities develop better project management skills, better implementation skills, better proposal writing skills, so that they could go out, leverage other resources, and do projects within their community to supplement the support that we were giving directly through our nonprofit. And so I would see something similar to that, where a lot of the organizations who do represent these underrepresented communities, they don't have a strong technical skills, they don't have the experience or to really go out and be competitive in this broader kind of grant-seeking environment. So whether they're applying for state money, whether they're applying for our money, whether they're applying for foundation money, they really struggle to be competitive. I was also a Peace Corps volunteer, so my bias is on the grassroots, and having grassroots level knowledge is the best knowledge for problems in the community and how to address them. But they have that knowledge, they have the best solutions, but they're not able to collate that into competitive proposals. So part of this in terms of investing resources, and this gets to the community grants NDA, which will be tomorrow, but with the county executive, what he's put in his budget, and which I strongly support, is investing resources in capacity building, technical assistance, grants management skills, so we can get these nonprofits to not just be coming to us for money, but to be really competitive for getting foundation funding, for getting state funding, maybe even some federal funding along the way. So part of that is weaning the nonprofits off of the county is to make them competitive and strong enough, and also just give them a range of program experience so that when they go out to, a funder, say, hey, we did X, Y, and Z, these programs are really successful. We want to do A, B, and C now, which are larger scales of these programs. So that's going to be a big part of the strategy going forward, is invest in them so that they can more competitively reach out and get more resources outside of the county.
I think capacity building is an incredibly important component to organizational management, and particularly for smaller nonprofits, of which I led one, helping the leaders of that organization, whether it's staff or the board or other volunteers, providing them with those that information and those resources. And we have organizations like Nonprofit Montgomery and some other larger, again, I'll use the word clearinghouse or umbrella organizations that help facilitate that. So I think you're onto the right track there. Last point I'll make is that I'll share with you something I've shared with my colleagues before from the dais. When I was the director of a small youth-serving nonprofit, I had some contracting issues with Montgomery County. And one year, I ended up not getting a contract signed, our grant approved, until the last week of that fiscal year, because it was a problem. And it is something that I refer to because we have to do a better job of our contracts and our procurement process. I know it is multi-pronged, and grants are not simply the release of funds to an organization. There is a whole internal process to get to that point, including management and metrics, which are important as well. But I think there certainly needs to be some streamlining of our procurement process, of our grant process, so that county's time is used wisely, the organization's time is used wisely, and that ultimately the funding that we've given to those organizations are actually used to provide the services we're paying for, which is really what we're talking about here. And so in your capacity, and you don't have to answer, but if you have thoughts, you can share them, but I think that is something that you would be particularly a good person to focus on when you jump in. And if you create some advisory group, which I echo the sentiments of my colleagues, you will hear that as well, that there are some streamlining issues that should certainly be worked on.
Well, I mean, that's a very good point, and I think that echoes very much the focus groups. When I first started with the county a few years ago, that was one of the big recommendations that came out, not just from the nonprofit side, but also from the county stakeholder side, where that we actually don't really give out grants. We give out non-competitive contracts, usually non-competitive reimbursable contracts, which and I know, having worked in nonprofits, are very, very different from a grant, and what other entities call grants and how those work in terms of giving funds, how those funds are tracked and used. So the county, up until the pandemic, with a few programs, the FEG program, a few other smaller programs, was able to actually give the money out as a grant, as a true grant, as I tend to call it within county discussions. So the idea is that this office would take that procedure, amp it up, frame it, for nonprofit contracts, for nonprofit services are provided, and have an alternative mechanism than the procurement mechanism, where it would go out as grants. I've worked for grantors as well, as I've been on the nonprofit side and been on the grantor side as well, and that's how we work. We had a procurement office, we had a grants office. They did different things, they had different processes. The nonprofit funding would flow through the grants office. It was more flexible, it was more nimble, it was more outcomes focused, whereas a contract is, again, providing a service reimbursed on eligible expense, which is not a good fit for the nonprofit community. So part of this office is to, again, take Administrative Procedure 2-4, which allows the county to enter into agreements. One of those types of agreements is a grant agreement. And take that, opportunity, amp it up, and start putting, the 200, 300, 400 community grants, as well as the, nonprofit contracts currently sitting in department-based budgets, and put it through a more flexible and appropriate funding mechanism. The reason this has not been done earlier, even though during the pandemic identified that it was possible was, again, this lack of administrative capacity. Who's going to own this process? Who's going to develop this process? You know, the Administrative Procedure 2-4 gives a wide berth for types of agreements, but doesn't specify how do you do this for a grant agreement. And so that's going to be the job of my office, is to develop those policies, procedures, those oversight mechanisms, all of that, so that we can use this mechanism in a broader scale. So again, and even looking at the grants we did give out, it's not a good template for, say, a nonprofit type contract or things that I used to get or I used to give out. So a lot of work's going to have to be done, but that is a priority of the county executive, is to start getting funding out the door in FY23 as grants, real grants, not as the non-competitive reimbursable contracts that the county has been doing.
I appreciate that. I like what you just said. And when we look at the pandemic and see the way we operated, we changed our policies and procedures to get funding to the businesses and organizations that needed it. And there are certainly lessons to be learned, and the comparisons that you just made, I think, are very adept, are very comparable to some of the work that's being done, and look forward to seeing you lead this effort with our nonprofit community and with the 9 members of the council. So thank you, and again, congratulations on your new role.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson, followed by Councilmember Katz.
Well, first of all, congratulations and welcome. It's not new, these issues for you. I know you've been working on it for a while. We appreciate all the work that you've done up to this point to help us get here, and look forward to you serving in this new role. I will say no good deed goes unpunished. Here in county government, you get a new appointment in the morning and you field questions on how you're going to solve all the world's problems by the afternoon. So welcome to Montgomery County for those who are watching, but we appreciate your service, and I am excited. You know, in your old role, I wasn't fully aware of some of your other background in nonprofit leadership and the Peace Corps and otherwise. So it is always fun for me, and I think for all of us, to get a nomination of somebody or an appointment of somebody to a new role where you see their background that includes the CV before they came into the role that they're in, perhaps outside of county government, that we might be less familiar with. So I appreciate that, and I think those background experiences that you have will really serve you well in this role in particular. And I appreciated talking about the grassroots of being a Peace Corps volunteer, and I will quadruple down, I guess it is at this point, for the need to leverage the partnerships and the viewpoints of the partners and the end users. In this case, they're both. The nonprofits are the end user of the office that you're leading, but they're also the partners for the services that we're trying to provide as county government. I think your Peace Corps background in that and your perspective on that will be helpful as well. We talked about leveraging a lot and helping organizations. I also think we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And I totally agree, and am enthusiastic about the need to set up an advisory board or group or organization, either formal or informal. I leave to you on how it's executed, but I share the views of colleagues who have noted that, and so I just think that would be really helpful. I also think we don't even need to reinvent the wheel. We have Nonprofit Montgomery, we have Nonprofit Village, we have a number of conveners and coordinators of a lot of these efforts. And so I would encourage you to leverage those, and where we can help build their capacity as opposed to, reinventing and competing, so to speak. I think that would be helpful. I know you have some experience working with them, so I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
I've had a very strong relationship with Nonprofit Montgomery, with Leslie and her team over the years, having the community grants portfolio and being able to use them as a convener, as a message board, be able to get information out there on our grant opportunities, on our grants processes, or even just let them know what's going on. During the pandemic, a lot of things were up in the air when we froze community grants. Why did we do that? What's going forward? What do you have to do? Just being able to reach out. So had a lot of experience working with them, with some of the other organizations as well. I've worked with some of the RSC directors in that same capacity to reach out to maybe some of the organizations in the region that aren't aware of Nonprofit Montgomery or don't work with them very much. So, but all that can be amped up. And again, that comes down to administrative capacity. You've all seen me with Montgomery College, with Community Engagement Cluster, with urban districts, now being, moving on from that role, being spread out and just being able to focus on this, can invest more time in reaching out to more parts of the county, to more organizations. But again, nonprofit Montgomery, very strong relationship with them. I hope that continues, and I'll do whatever I can to make sure that continues. But just being able to reach out to a large number of nonprofits in the area. So,
Appreciate that. You've clarified a little bit today, but I'm still not quite sure I've honed in on it, so I just wanted to put a fine point on this. For 3 years, we've been transitioning, and of course, this went a little slower than we wanted at first, and then a pandemic happened that none of us expected, which certainly has created some of the challenges that we've had. We're finally at the point where we're ready to move forward with this, with your appointment this morning, just in the nick of time before today's afternoon session, which weren't for the last minute, we wouldn't get anything done, I suppose. But it's still not totally clear to me in terms of the office of what the vision is. I had always envisioned this, and it was always presented originally as the primary function was moving this county council, county executive grant program that has taken multiple iterations, and to have a professional office that oversees that puts metrics on it and has a focus and is more professional and institutionalized perhaps than our prior process that tended to change year in and year out. And as part of that discussion, we added in this capacity building, technical assistance, helping to get grants and others, which I think is great, and I'm very much supportive of. What is before us now, at least from what I can gather, is the technical assistance and the capacity building and the helping organizations get outside funding from the federal government, the state government, maybe private foundations, seems to be the primary focus of what we've seen in the kind of nonprofit grant program is less clear in terms of what that process is going to look like. So I'm just hoping that you could help us understand that vision and what this office is going to do and how it's going to function vis-a-vis both the technical assistance and capacity building piece of it, but also the turning what you referred to as the non-competitive contracts to actual grants, which, as you shared, is the goal and the vision of the county executive.
Yeah. So the function of this office can be put in two main buckets. The first bucket is increase the amount of outside funding that flows into the county, whether it's from federal sources, state sources, or foundation sources. So part of that is going to be this office, and that's going to be one of the program manager twos, is just going to be searching for grant opportunities, working with departments to put together more competitive applications. And that does benefit the nonprofit community as well, because if we get money, we're tend to going to implement that money through, just like ARPA funds, most of that flows through the nonprofit community to be implemented anyways. Building capacity of not nonprofits, but of the county departments to be able to be doing that more competitively. Some departments are very good at that. There's a lot of small departments or offices who just don't have the capacity, the bandwidth, or the know-how. So there's a lot of support there. And then getting to Council President Albernoz's initial question, leveraging, our resources, our kind of gravitas to make sure that nonprofit applications are more competitive. So I would not see this office doing direct technical assistance to nonprofits directly. That would be more, we would have a contract with Nonprofit Montgomery, Nonprofit Village, some other provider, to be implementing that technical assistance for us. So we would probably be, involved in the contract or the grant or the contract that would be given to them, but there's no need to, reinvent the wheel. If we have a good technical assistance provider, work with them and make sure they're implementing it. The other bucket of functions is improve the distribution of resources from the county. And so part of that is establishing a grants mechanism and just having that legal mechanism to be able to give money out as a real grant, not as these non-competitive contracts that we call grants. So that's technical in the process. That's going to be very difficult. Well, not very difficult, but it's going to be a lot to put that together and make sure that works. And then the other part of it is, again, these grants processes. similar to the community grants or other competitive grant applications that we do. So during the pandemic, a lot of departments realized that competitive grants processes could be a great way to get money out into the community, but they don't know how to implement them. Some of them tried, it was really difficult, didn't realize how administratively onerous it is. They didn't have experience with it. So a lot of time and effort was spent on this that, probably could be better used. So this office will be providing technical assistance to departments who want to be implementing these competitive grant application processes. So one of the ones I spoke to recently, just simply within my OMB capacity, is Department of Transportation, the TSIF funds. They have this huge amount of money. They want to get it out more efficiently. We would be, my office would be supporting them in developing a competitive grants application process so that they can, compete this money out, distribute it more effectively to nonprofit organizations, so that this money can get in the hands of the nonprofits that provide these services. So those functions are all going to be sitting within this office. And again, the other program manager too is going to be working on the grants, the grants mechanism oversight piece, and then as well as assisting the departments as they implement these grants processes. Now the community grants, that's been a centralized grant function. So this office will be implementing that directly. They would not be administering actual grants awards themselves. That would still be with the departments. But in terms of how that would function broadly, that's going to be something that's going to be worked on. Does that address your question? Or
It does to an extent, but let me ask it more directly. If there's two types of organizations out there that might be listening to this conversation, organizations that have gone through the process, have gotten a grant, and have been in a holding pattern for 3 years. Some to their benefit, perhaps some to their detriment. They've gotten the same amount with an escalator potentially. Each year for the past 3 years. They haven't been judged to prove whether or not there are metrics that demonstrate the need. They haven't been able to prove that they need more. They've been held constant. What is the process for them? What should they expect? When should they expect it? How is that going to work? And where are we going to be, a year from now, vis-a-vis those folks who have been used to going through this process, or at least for the last few years, have kind of expected a certain impact. And then there are those who have wanted to participate in this grants process. Maybe they used to get a grant and they stopped. Maybe they have a new program that they think would be worthy of this, or maybe they're a new organization that propped up during the last 3 years and haven't had an opportunity to do it. We have $750,000 that we're appropriating for new programs. When will they be able to access those funds, and how will that process work, and what is the timing expected for that?
So for the money within the CE's FY23 request, we would open up a competitive grants process during FY23. So you would be appropriating a block of funding with a defined purpose on it. We would set up a competitive grants process. The timeline hasn't been established yet, but in the fall or winter, they would apply. If they get the funds, then we would be able to immediately disperse it. Whereas in the historical process is the application cycle was tied to the appropriation cycle. So they would apply, they would get on the CE's recommended list, and then they would have to wait until it passes through council, 6 months later, whether that contract would be awarded. By having it appropriated as a block of funds and then being able to disperse, we can get that out immediately. And you've done that with many other types of programs using ARPA funds or other relief funds. So in terms of the broader, $8.7 million still sitting in the CE's recommended NDA, that is going to be part of the FY24 process, and looking at how that is going to be competed out. Is it going to be competed out differently than historically? So that has not been set yet. So that's going to be determined at this time. So one nuance I think that makes it complicated is that what you don't want is an interruption in service, because we have historically tied the community grants to the appropriation cycle. A lot of programs get their money renewed on July 1st. So if we switch all of these funds to the post-appropriation method and we have the process after that, there's a chance that there's like a 3 or 4 month gap between when they get when the county funds expire or are used up, and when their new money comes in. And so that's going to be a challenge that we have to work through. So just to kind of switch it from these models is going to potentially create some really serious issues with nonprofits who need the continuity of funding. So that's something that's got to be worked out going forward.
You've only been at this for, 4 hours. So I'll give you, time to wrap your head around this. I know the issues aren't new to you, but you have not been empowered to make recommendations to the executive and come back to us and tell you how you're going to solve all of those problems.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally appreciate that. I'm not trying to be unfair here, but I will close on this. I'll express some frustration that I have that this same concern of that gap has existed for 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. We've been talking about this exact same process, the exact same concern, and we kept everybody harmless the first year in order to have time to address it. The pandemic didn't happen until 7-8 months into the fiscal year and 10 months after the conversation was initiated, where we agreed that that was going to be the process and the program. Understandably, the pandemic has been a tough time to change processes for nonprofit partners and for county government. Everybody was doing other things, and I'm totally understanding of that. But we're never going to get out of this cycle unless we start having the conversation 3 months ago for next fiscal year as opposed to 3 months from now. And the concern that I have, and it's not your fault, you were appointed this morning, but the concern that I have is that you were just appointed this morning. We're going to get through this budget cycle. By the time we get all the other things figured out with this office, the exact issue that you just talked about is going to be an issue again at the budget cycle next year. And it results in mixed messages to the nonprofit partner community. It results in confusing dynamics among county leadership. And we got to get out of this vicious cycle. So a respectful plea from me to you in your new role. I'm here to help. We're all here to help. We all want you to succeed and this office to succeed. We all want to build on the strength of the partnerships that have only increased during the pandemic and has been one of the real bright lights that has been a strength of the county throughout this pandemic. But we do have to get out of this cycle, and we do need to make sure that we're over communicating, that we're getting ahead of the issues. And I know that you're already in a little bit of a detriment because you're behind in terms of even getting this set up for next year. And you have all of these other things to do in terms of getting this office set up. So I hope it works out. We're here to help. Please over communicate with us and with council staff along the way. Let's make the decisions and move the ball forward together so that next year at this time, we're talking about a new process that achieves the goals that we've been talking about for 3 or 4 years.
If I can respond to that, one of the other consistent pieces of feedback that we got from the nonprofits and the focus groups before the pandemic, so about 2.5 years ago, was, they liked a lot of the ideas. They liked to put stuff, what had been put forward, but across several focus groups, who were communicating differently, not in contact with each other, they said, the devil's in the details. And if you set this up wrong, it can cause more harm and more difficulties and more frustrations for the nonprofit community. So in terms of the CE delaying on this, it was to let this office get set up and let them focus on the process, and that's me now, to find a solution. And again, I agree with all of you in terms of the advisory board, the communication. It's going to have to be going back to the nonprofits. And again, leveraging my own nonprofit experience, can't count the number of times where my funder came to me and said, hey, we want you to do this. And I said, hey, that's a horrible idea. And let me explain to you why, because I have the on the ground experience, or this is what my staff is telling me. This is what, people understand. I was working abroad, the cultural nuances of some of these things. So I think that communication with them, working with them on developing this process and how it's going to be going forward to make sure that we don't inadvertently cause more issues for them than we solve. So I'm with you on that, but I think we need to really go through and dig in and make sure that this is aligned right. Because again, just even with the example I used of the appropriation cycle, how it's tied to that, you could very easily result in gaps in service for programs that are critical to the county. that's going to really cause a lot of issues. So just we need to dig through that, but I welcome your support and look forward to working with you on this issue.
Appreciate it. Over communicate, over prepare. Good luck. Thanks.
Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and congratulations as well. Because others spoke, I was able to look up what's after quadruple down, and it's quintuple down. I just want you to know that. So, but it took me a while to figure that out because it usually does not go that long in the process. But and I'm not going to repeat what's been said. Obviously, you're very qualified, and certainly we're very glad you're here. But I too have been very concerned about our nonprofit partners not being as strong as they possibly could be. In many cases, the monies that you are overseeing, that you will be working with, is their lifeblood. Mm-hmm. And to the earlier points, a few weeks, a few months when you don't have the money to pay for what you need and to get to the people that need to the community that needs it is not healthy. It's not good for any of us. So my colleagues have already made their points. I'm not going to repeat them, but you know as well as I do how important your job is. And certainly our nonprofit partners are going to look to you, look to us, and look to everyone else to make certain that they can remain strong. So congratulations. Welcome to the new job. And I know you're hitting the ground running. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Great. Before we move the staff recommendation, I'll just note one last thing, that Ms. McGuire's hit the ground running in the HHS committee, picking up where Linda McMillan left off, and the team has been doing a great job. One of the things that we've talked about is identifying low-hanging fruit on the expenditure side within nonprofit organizations to see if there's a way that we can help alleviate some of those expenses in different ways, things like rent, those common line items that maybe creatively we may be able to leverage more effectively, more in-kind contributions, I guess you can say. So, but we will invite you into those conversations because they are connected to the overall grants discussion, and it's just another example of the collaborative effort that will need to take place in order to holistically meet the needs of our nonprofit organizations. So, but we look forward to it. All right, we have a staff recommendation, colleagues. Would somebody like to move support for that staff recommendation? Moved by Councilmember Friedson, seconded by Councilmember Katz. All those in favor? And that is unanimous among all those present. So thank you all very much. And with that, we are adjourned.